Superman has died, retired, gone insane, become a god, turned into a dictator, and been absorbed into the sun. DC has killed this man in every way imaginable, in a few ways that shouldn't be. So today, we're breaking down every major fate Superman has ever faced and what each one says about the most powerful hero ever created, starting with the one that made the entire world pay attention, the death of Superman. On November 18th, 1992, Superman died. Not in some elaborate cosmic event, not from a magical curse or a reality-shattering paradox. He died the simplest way possible. He punched something and it punched him back harder. Doomsday was a creature with zero personality, zero motivation, and zero dialogue. It existed for exactly one purpose, to kill Superman, and it did that job with terrifying efficiency. No monologue, no master plan, just a gray monster in a green jumpsuit tearing through the entire Justice League like they were made of wet cardboard. Booster Gold went down. Blue Beetle went down. Guy Gardner, who never shuts up about how tough he is, went down. All of them dropped before Superman even showed up. And when Superman did show up, it wasn't some graceful battle between equals. It was a street fight. The two of them literally beat each other to death in the middle of Metropolis. The final issue used nothing but full-page splash panels. One punch per page, each hit getting more desperate than the last. Superman's cape was shredded. His suit was torn apart. Blood was everywhere. And on the last page, both of them collapsed. Superman died in Lois Lane's arms while the entire city watched. Here's the thing. This wasn't just a comic book moment. This was a global news event. Real newspapers ran the headline. CNN covered it. People who had never read a comic in their lives lined up at shops to buy the issue in its black polybag with the memorial armband inside. Over 6 million copies sold. That's not a comic book number. That's a cultural earthquake. But the real legacy of the death of Superman isn't the death itself. It's what it proved. DC learned that killing Superman moved more units than anything they'd ever published. And that lesson, that death sells, would shape how they treated him for the next 3 decades, which would be fine if they only did it once. They didn't. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow? Most Superman endings involve someone killing him. This one's different. In this one, he kills himself. Well, sort of. Let me explain. In September 1986, DC published what they explicitly billed as the historic last issue of Superman, issue 423, followed immediately by Action Comics 583. Alan Moore wrote both parts as a deliberate farewell to the Silver Age Superman before the title relaunched as Adventures of Superman. And the way he chose to end it wasn't with a fight, it was with a choice. The story uses a frame narrative set 10 years after Superman's disappearance. Lois Lane is sitting down with a Daily Planet reporter named Tim Crane, recounting Superman's final days. And those final days are rough. His enemies escalate, his allies fall. The walls close in from every direction until Superman is backed into a corner with 0 options left. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. During the chaos, MSCUY's Pete Hulk, the silly fifth-dimensional imp who'd been a joke villain for decades, reveals himself as something far worse. Superman confronts him, and MXUY's Pete Hulk is torn in half between dimensions. Not off-screen, not implied. Torn in half in a Superman comic. From the guy who used to make buildings turn into candy. Which is, not ideal. After that, Superman walks into a chamber and voluntarily exposes himself to gold kryptonite. Not green, gold. The kind that permanently strips all Kryptonian powers. Every single one. Gone forever. Then he walks out into the Arctic and vanishes. No body, no explosion, no last stand. Just a man who used to be a god, walking into the snow with nothing. It reads like a suicide. That's the obvious interpretation, and Moore lets you sit with it for exactly long enough to feel sick about it. Then the true ending hits. Lois finishes her story. Tim Crane leaves, and as he's walking out, he passes Lois's husband, a quiet, ordinary man named Jordan Elliott. They have a son named Jonathan. The final panel shows the kid winking directly at the reader while crushing a piece of coal in his tiny hand. Superman didn't die. He just stopped being Superman. He traded flight, invulnerability, and the ability to move planets for a wife, a kid, and a house somewhere nobody would ever find him. And honestly, that might be the bravest thing any version of this character has ever done. Choosing to be powerless in a universe where you could be everything. Most people can't even choose what to have for dinner. But if you think quietly, walking away from godhood sounds dramatic, wait until you see what happens when Superman tries to come back and fix everything by force. Kingdom Come. Superman doesn't retire because he's tired. He retires because humanity tells him he's wrong. Here's the setup. The Joker kills Lois Lane. That alone would break most people. But what breaks Superman isn't the murder. It's what happens after. A metahuman named Magog tracks down the Joker and kills him, and the American public acquits Magog. They celebrate it. The people Superman spent his entire life protecting looked at everything he stood for. Every principle, every pulled punch, every time he chose mercy over vengeance. And they said, actually, we prefer the guy who just kills people. So Superman leaves. He walks away from all of it and disappears for 10 years. And the world falls apart. Without Superman holding the line, a new generation of metahumans rises up with zero moral compass and even less restraint. They fight constantly. They destroy recklessly, and nobody can stop them. Then Magog, the guy humanity chose over Superman, gets into a battle with the parasites somewhere in the American Midwest. The fight ruptures Captain Atom's containment, triggering a nuclear detonation that kills approximately 1 million people, irradiates the entire state of Kansas, and cripples the US economy overnight. 1 million people. Because the hero humanity preferred couldn't control himself. So Superman comes back, but the man who returns is not the same man who left. This Superman doesn't inspire. He enforces. His solution to the metahuman crisis is the Gulag, a massive detention facility built directly on the irradiated Kansas wasteland, where 1 million people just died, which is, not ideal as a symbol of hope. He's literally building a prison on a mass grave and calling it rehabilitation. Mark Waid wrote this as a 4-issue Elseworlds miniseries in 1996, and Alex Ross painted every single panel in gouache. The result looks less like a comic book and more like Renaissance religious art, which is entirely the point. The whole story is framed through biblical imagery. The Spectre, God's spirit of vengeance, supervises the events like an angel of judgment. A pastor named Norman McKay serves as the audience surrogate, witnessing Superman's authoritarian crusade the way a prophet witnesses divine wrath. But here's where it gets complicated. Superman isn't wrong that the new metahumans are dangerous. 1 million dead bodies prove that. He's not wrong that someone needs to impose order. The problem is that his version of order looks exactly like tyranny. Batman opposes him, Wonder Woman enables him, and the man who once stood for hope becomes the thing the entire world fears. The question Kingdom Come never fully answers is whether Superman's certainty saved the world or nearly destroyed it. And honestly, that ambiguity is what makes it one of the greatest Superman stories ever told. But if you think a Superman who builds prisons is dark, wait until you meet the one who builds a dictatorship. Injustice. The Joker has done a lot of terrible things across DC's history. He's paralyzed Barbara Gordon, beaten Jason Todd to death with a crowbar, and terrorized Gotham for decades. But his single cruelest act wasn't aimed at Batman at all. It was aimed at Superman. And he didn't attack Superman's body. He attacked his perception. In the Injustice timeline, the Joker kidnaps Lois Lane and doses Superman with a modified version of Scarecrow's fear toxin. While hallucinating, Superman sees Doomsday standing in front of him, the creature that already killed him once. So he does what any version of Superman would do against Doomsday. He hits as hard as he possibly can, but it's not Doomsday, it's Lois, his pregnant wife. He kills her with his own hands while believing he's saving her. Superman doesn't choose to become a murderer. He's tricked into it by a clown with a chemistry set, and the Joker rigged Lois's heartbeat to a nuclear warhead. The moment her heart stops, Metropolis goes with her. Superman loses his wife, his unborn child, and his entire city in about 30 seconds. So he kills the Joker, puts his fist through his chest on live television, which is, not ideal for someone who's supposed to represent hope. That single act breaks the superhero community in half. Heroes start picking sides, and Superman, the guy who once stood for restraint above all else, decides that restraint is what got everyone killed. His logic is simple and terrifying. If he controlled everything, nobody could ever be hurt again. By the end of year 5, he's established the one-world regime. He's personally killed Oliver Queen, Kid Flash, and multiple members of the Titans. Batman leads an underground resistance, and even Batman's own son Damian defects to Superman's side. The guy who used to catch falling planes is now executing people who disagree with him. Here's what makes Injustice different from Kingdom Come, because on paper they sound similar. Both Supermen lose Lois. Both build authoritarian regimes. But Kingdom Come Superman builds a prison. Injustice Superman builds a kill list. One crosses the line reluctantly. The other sprints past it and never looks back. Every murder he commits is an attempt to build a world where no one can ever be hurt the way he was. And the tragedy is that he becomes exactly the thing he's trying to prevent. An unstoppable force that kills innocent people because he's convinced it's for the greater good. The Joker won. Not because he survived, but because he turned Superman into a version of himself. A guy who decides, who lives, and who dies based on his own broken logic. But if you think a Superman who chose tyranny is dark, wait until you see the one who didn't even get a choice. The one who was handed a leash by the United States government and told to heal. The Dark Knight returns. Superman doesn't die in this story. He doesn't transcend, doesn't fall to some cosmic threat, doesn't sacrifice himself in a blaze of glory. He just stops being Superman, and that's worse than any of those options. Published in 1986, Frank Miller's 4-issue miniseries is one of the most influential comics ever written, and it features a version of Superman that will make you genuinely uncomfortable. Because this isn't a story about Superman losing a fight. It's a story about Superman losing himself. Here's the setup. It's a dystopian 1986. Bruce Wayne is 55 years old and has been retired for a decade, The world is falling apart. And Superman? Superman works for the United States government. Specifically, he works for President Ronald Reagan. His Kryptonian biology has kept him looking younger than every human around him, and he has exactly zero autonomy. He goes where the president points him. He does what the administration tells him to do. He is, functionally, a missile with a cape. And here's the thing. He knows it, but he's convinced himself that serving the state is the only way to keep the peace. That compliance is a form of protection. That if he just follows orders, the world stays in one piece. Which is, not ideal. The Reagan-era politics aren't subtext here. They're the text. Miller wrote Superman as the logical endpoint of American military power, something so dangerous it can only be controlled by total obedience. He doesn't get to choose which conflicts are just. He gets deployed like a weapon system, and he says yes sir every single time. Then, a Soviet nuclear warhead detonates, and Superman barely survives. He's weakened, drained, pulling himself together from near death, and that's when Batman decides to come out of retirement. The fight is iconic. Batman in powered armor, tactical brilliance on full display, and a kryptonite-tipped arrow fired by an aging Oliver Queen who's missing an arm. Batman beats Superman decisively. Then Bruce Wayne appears to drop dead from a heart attack right there in the street, but he didn't die. He faked it. And Superman knows. He stands over Batman's body, listens carefully, and hears the faint heartbeat still ticking away beneath the silence. He says nothing. He tells no one. He just turns around and goes back to work. That's the ending. Superman walks back to the government that owns him and keeps doing what he's told. He knows his oldest friend is alive, hiding underground, building something new, and he does nothing about it. Not because he's evil, because he's compliant. Miller's argument is brutal and simple. Compliance in the face of injustice is its own form of corruption. Superman has all the power in the world and none of the will to use it independently. He chose safety over principle. And by the end of the story, he's not a hero anymore. He's a cautionary tale, the most powerful being on Earth, reduced to a government employee who pretends he doesn't hear the heartbeat of the one man who still had the guts to stand up. But if you think a Superman stripped of his identity is dark, wait until you see what happens when you strip him of his entire country. Red sun, same baby, same rocket, different farm. That's all it takes to completely rewrite the most iconic superhero in history. Red Sun is a 3-issue prestige format Elseworlds miniseries from 2003, written by Mark Miller, and it asks the simplest question imaginable. What if Superman's rocket landed 12 hours later? Because of Earth's rotation, instead of touching down in rural Kansas, the spacecraft crashes onto a Ukrainian collective farm in 1938. Baby Kal-El is discovered not by the Kents, but by Soviet authorities. And just like that, the symbol of American idealism becomes a weapon of the Warsaw Pact. Here's what makes Red Sun genuinely unsettling. Superman isn't brainwashed. He isn't corrupted. He's described in propaganda as fighting for Stalin, socialism, and the international expansion of the Warsaw Pact, and he does it willingly, because the people around him told him that's what good looks like. He wants to help. He wants to protect the vulnerable. He wants to build a better world. The exact same impulses that make him a hero in Kansas make him equally effective as a Soviet state asset, which is, not ideal. After Stalin dies from cyanide poisoning, Superman doesn't just serve the state, he becomes it. He assumes full leadership of the Soviet Union and transforms it into something called the Global United States. Zero crime, zero poverty, zero unemployment. A perfect utopia built and maintained by a god who never sleeps. On paper, it sounds incredible. In practice, it means one alien has absolute control over every human being on the planet, and nobody can do a single thing about it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Iron Curtain, Lex Luthor becomes president of the United States. Not because he loves America, but because he's the only human alive stubborn enough to believe he can outsmart a Kryptonian. Their ideological war drives global geopolitics for the entire series. Superman represents benevolent totalitarianism. Luthor represents chaotic freedom. And the terrifying part is that both of them have a point. But here's where it gets really interesting. Luthor eventually dies. Old age, natural causes. And at his funeral, a man appears in a civilian business suit and thick glasses. It's Superman, still alive, still watching. He's outlived every single person he ever ruled, fought, or loved, and he's chosen to just quietly exist among the humans he once controlled. Immortal, anonymous, and alone. That would be a powerful enough ending on its own. But Millar wasn't done. Billions of years in the future, Earth is dying. The last descendant of Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, a scientist named Jor-El, places his infant son Kal-El into a rocket and launches him backward through time. The destination? A Ukrainian farm. 1938. Superman is Luthor's descendant. His greatest enemy literally created him. And by existing, Superman ensures that Luthor rises to oppose him, which ensures Luthor's bloodline survives, which ensures Superman gets born, which ensures he lands in Ukraine. It's a closed temporal loop with no beginning, no end, and no escape. The hero and the villain are the same family tree, feeding into each other for eternity. Not all stories have a point. This one has too many, and every single one of them is a circle. But if you think an eternal time loop is a heavy way to end a Superman Superman story, wait until you see what happens when he's told he has 1 year left to live. All-Star Superman. This is widely considered the greatest Superman story ever written, and honestly, it's hard to argue. Published across 12 issues from 2005 to 2008, written by Grant Morrison and illustrated by Frank Quitely, All-Star Superman asks one simple question: what does the most powerful man alive do when he finds out he's dying? The answer is everything that matters. Here's the setup. Lex Luthor, operating from death row because of course he is, orchestrates a scenario that floods Superman's cells with an overwhelming dose of yellow solar radiation. The result is paradoxical. Superman becomes stronger than he's ever been. New abilities, unprecedented power levels, the works. But the same energy supercharging him is also destroying him from the inside. His cells are oversaturating, burning out like a battery pushed past its limit. Doctors give him approximately 1 year to live. So what does Superman do with his final year on Earth? He doesn't rage, he doesn't spiral, he gets to work. Morrison frames Superman's remaining time as a series of 12 labors, and every single one reveals what the character actually values when the clock is ticking. He gives Lois Lane superpowers for a day, not so she can fight alongside him, but so she can finally understand what it feels like to see the world through his eyes. He attempts to restore the bottled city of Kandor to its full size. He discovers a cure for childhood cancer, and in one of the most quietly devastating moments in comic book history, he talks a suicidal teenager off a ledge. No punching, no laser eyes, no world-ending threat, just a guy in a cape telling someone they matter and meaning it. That's the whole point of the story. Superman's greatest power was never his strength. It was his capacity to care about one individual person while carrying the weight of an entire planet on his shoulders. A dying man who could have spent his last months doing literally anything chose to make strangers' lives better, which is, the most Superman thing imaginable. But here's where it gets mythic. Solaris, an artificial sun engineered as a weapon, poisons Earth's actual sun. The star is dying, and with it, every living thing in the solar system. Superman's final labor requires him to fly directly into the heart of the sun and repair it from the inside. Icarus flew too close to the sun and burned. Superman flies into the sun and becomes it. His body transforms into pure energy. His consciousness merges with the star itself. He doesn't just fix it, he builds internal machinery within the sun designed to keep it burning, to keep it sustaining all life on Earth indefinitely. He doesn't fight death. He makes death useful. Every sunrise after that moment is literally Superman keeping his promise. His death isn't an ending. It's a transformation into eternal life support for the entire solar system. The sun that warms every human face on this planet is, in this story, a man who loved the world so much, he became the thing that keeps it alive. That's not a superhero story. That's a myth, the kind civilizations used to build entire religions around. And Grant Morrison knew exactly what he was doing, because what begins here, with Superman entering the sun, doesn't end in 2008. It extends forward across thousands of centuries into a story Morrison had already been telling for a decade, one that reaches its true terrifying conclusion in the 853rd century. DC, 1 million. Every other fate on this list has Superman dying, retiring, corrupting, or transforming. DC 1 million asks a different question entirely. What happens if he just never stops? The answer is genuinely insane. In 1998, Grant Morrison wrote a crossover event set in the 853rd century, roughly the year 85,271 AD, and at the center of it is the original Superman, not a descendant, not a legacy hero. The actual Clark Kent, still alive, still going, having outlived every single person he ever loved by tens of thousands of years. Here's how it happened. Sometime in the late 21st century, after everyone close to him had died, Superman flew into the heart of Earth's sun, not to destroy himself. He just had nowhere else to go. Everyone was gone. Lois, the League, all of it. So he built a fortress of solitude inside the star itself and stayed there for 15,000 years. Let that number sit. 15,000 years alone inside a burning star. That's longer than all of recorded human civilization. And he spent every single one of those years absorbing solar radiation, the thing that makes him powerful in the first place. If a few hours under a yellow sun lets him bench press a building, 15,000 years turns him into something that doesn't have a word in any language. But he wasn't just sitting there cooking like a rotisserie chicken in a cosmic oven. During those millennia, Superman traversed the entire DC universe, every corner of time and space. He walked through dimensions that don't have names. He reached heaven and hell themselves, not metaphorically. Literally walked into the afterlife, looked around, and kept going. By the time the 853rd century rolls around, Superman Prime 1 million isn't a superhero anymore. He's functionally omnipotent. He can alter reality. He can manipulate DNA across time. He shares fractions of his power with descendants, and those fractions alone make them stronger than any metahuman who's ever existed. This is where every other Superman fate converges. The one who died fighting Doomsday couldn't stop punching. The one who gave up his powers chose love over legacy. The Tyrant chose control. All-Star Superman chose to become the Sun. DC. 1 million is what happens when Superman chooses all of it. He endures the grief, he absorbs the power, he walks through literal hell, and he comes out the other side as something beyond comprehension. Not a man, not a hero, not even a symbol anymore. A god who built himself through 15,000 years of patience and unimaginable loneliness. And that's the part nobody talks about. The cost? Every version of Superman pays a price for what he becomes. Death, corruption, submission, anonymity. Superman Prime. 1 million paid the highest price of all. He got everything, every power imaginable, every corner of existence mapped and understood, and he got it by being completely alone for longer than most civilizations last. He is simultaneously the most powerful being in DC continuity, and the most isolated creature who has ever existed, a god living inside a star, powering all life, connected to everything, close to nothing. Superman's final fate isn't death. It isn't corruption. It isn't even transcendence. It's patience, an eternity of it, and the willingness to keep going when there's nobody left to keep going for. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.